Okay, welcome to Living Writers interview series. Today we have best-selling author Soraya Lane here with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me. It's wonderful to be chatting today.
Yeah, of course. So I had a chance to take a look at some of your Wives of War book.
Yeah,
I believe
sure.
that's what it was. The Wives of War, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
that within like the first couple pages, it just seems to be this like common denominator with people who are best-selling authors. Like the minute I start reading it, I just feel like I'm emotionally in that situation. Like I just had this like heart clenching, like nostalgia feeling, like as if I've ever been in a war situation like that before. So I could see how you're successful for sure.
Thank you so much. That's just made my day. I'm obviously doing my job. If you could feel the emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even when I looked at the cover, I was just like, oh, it hurts for some reason.
Look, and I think, you know what? It hurts. It hurts when I'm writing them as well. I had someone, a lovely reader, message me yesterday actually, and say, about a particular scene in one of my books and how it made her cry and how emotional it was. And I said to her, I cried writing it. Like it is the emotion, in some of those scenes, and especially writing about war. I hope my readers know that it takes just as much out of me writing it. Like I really do feel all those emotions, and it's so lovely to hear when someone has actually felt that when they're reading the book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I should check out more of it. I've been in that scenario before, like waiting for my man to like come back from war, and there's some like it's really intense. Like it's an intense romance, you know. So I'm sure
Absolutely.
I'm sure that the books are amazing. So I definitely have to like
Oh,
read more
thank
than a few pages.
Yeah. And look, like you say, war it's a different, sorry, different situation. So it is, the emotions and the love is heightened, whether you've got a man away at war, now in present day, or whether it was back then. I think the emotions are really high, and it is that just, yeah, just a really heightened feeling and relationship too.
Yeah. What made you start writing about that?
Oh, look, I actually started out writing contemporary romance, and I thought that that was going to be my career, was writing contemporary. And then I had started reading quite a few historical books and really loving them. And then I went back to university and did my Master of Fine Arts, so my postgrad in creative writing. And I thought, look, I need to challenge myself to do something that is completely different to what I'm used to writing, and something that was really going to push me creatively. And so I had this idea about, from what I'd read in nonfiction, about war brides who were English and met their husbands in London on English soil and fell in love with these American GIs and ended up traveling back to America with them at the end of the war. And so that book took me 2 years to write. It was so hard, but it just really it just gave me that, I guess, that just that love for that, especially that World War II period. And I thought, well, maybe I'll write one more. And then they started selling really well, which was so exciting, and my readers wanted more. So I've just ended up, I've just become so passionate about the World War II genre and just telling those stories, particularly about women from the past. And I think, so many women's stories haven't been told. And we've heard that, the hero in so many war stories or films is a man. And while that is justified, and it has been fantastic, I do think that, it's time to have a female lead, front and center, and showing, their story, and that they were the hero in many situations as well.
So what did you do for the research of that? Like, were you, because you must have had some kind of like needing to know some kind of details and like even emotionally what people were going through. Like,
Yeah,
how did
look, it
you
was
research
the
that?
research. The research was the hard part. It was just so tough trying to find out all that information, all those little details that were going to really bring the story to life. Thankfully, there were many, many memoirs and biographies written by war brides. So for that first one, it was almost easier than some of my other novels because it was so specific, and there were so many stories about war brides going from England to America. So that was a really good starting point for me. And there was also, in fact, I've probably got it somewhere. A gorgeous little book. It was Good Housekeeping's Guide to Being an American Housewife, I think it was called, and it was published in like 1946, I think. And it was given out to these war brides when they were coming from England, just about how to be the perfect American housewife and how to, how to fit into life over there and all the things your husband would expect from you. And so it was, honestly, it was hilarious. It was beautiful, but also alarming, and it was a really good look at what these women were going to, what they were, what it was going to be like for them there. And so that was actually my starting point. And from there, I just, every time I found one biography or one memoir, I'd find another one. And so, the research was tough. And that's the hard part, I think, for me, was knowing when to stop researching and start writing, because you could just keep researching forever.
So what made you get into writing in the first place?
Look, I've always been a writer. I just, from being a 9-10-year-old, writing huge long stories and notebooks and showing them to my teacher. It's just always been something that I've done and loved. I kept writing through school, and then when I went to university, I sort of started writing some quite dark poetry. I think it was sort of just a quick, easy way to keep writing. And then my now husband, but then boyfriend, said to me, if you could do anything in the world or have any job, what would you be doing? And I said to him, I'd be an author. And he just looked at me and said, well, why aren't you writing anything? And it was just really that moment that really got me back into writing and made me think, you know what, no one's going to publish my work unless I'm actually writing something. And that started I started my first manuscript, and I think I had 6 unpublished full manuscripts before I sold my 7th. I think it was the 7th story I'd written that I sold. And I actually started out writing romance, as I said before, and I signed with my editor and my agent within a couple of weeks. So I spent 6-7 years trying to get published, trying to find an agent, and then it all just happened pretty much all at the same time. So and that was just over 10 years ago. So it's been a great last decade in publishing for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you started out not with self-publishing, but with like the first time being with a publishing house.
Yes, definitely. And when I started, so that was around 2010, 2011. And so self-publishing wasn't really a big thing then. When someone said they were going to, they had an ebook and didn't have a print book, you sort of thought, I want the print deal, or, books need to be in print. And then over the next, in fact, it probably was around that 2011 to 2013 mark, suddenly self-publishing became a thing. It became a way for authors to get their books out there, to make a serious living from what they were doing creatively. And so it was really interesting being part of that change and seeing that happening to other author friends, and also for me as well, because I had written contemporary romance for publishers, and I did self-publish that first historical novel, and a friend kept saying to me, don't leave it there on your computer, put it out there. My agent didn't think it was saleable at the time, and so I sort of thought, well, look, it's maybe I'll just leave it. And then I put it out there, and a few weeks later thought, I must go on and see if I've sold any copies. And it was just crazy. It had really taken off, and the book just kept on sort of, my readership kept on growing from there. Now, of course, I check my sales, and I'm, obsessively probably every hour. But back then, you sort of thought, check in every week, see how the book's going. And it just didn't seem as serious or I guess as viable as a sales platform. And obviously a huge amount has changed in the last decade.
Yeah, I would say that's crazy. So, do you prefer that whole self-publishing route at this point, or are you still just like sticking with the publishing house?
I think I'm actually with Amazon Publishing now. So because of that self-published novel, and it did very well at the time, one of the editors, editorial director at Amazon Publishing in London, saw the book and saw how well it was doing. And she emailed my agent, and they made an offer to me to republish that book under the Amazon Publishing, under Lake Union, their imprint there. And so I did sign with Amazon, and I'm still very, very happy working with them, working with their publishing division rather than self-publishing. But, I got rights back to some of my backlist titles recently from my romance, romance books, and I have really been really excited and put them up self-published them on Amazon, and actually I have gone wide on those ones as well, so they're sort of published everywhere now. So I really think it's nice to be able to be hybrid and to have that relationship with a publisher that you really value, but also to be able to self-publish as well, and just know that if something happens, or you're no longer no longer have a publishing contract, that there is a really great viable option out there in terms of self-publishing. So I always say never. You never know whether you're going to work with a publisher and love it, or self-publish, and how things change over the years as well. So I'm always very open to new ideas and just whatever the future brings. Yeah.
So after that time of waiting to get the publisher, did you figure out, did you learn anything from that process that you would have liked to have implemented in the beginning?
Oh, definitely. And, I often say to other authors who are early in their career and perhaps feeling, it's hard. It's hard to be rejected. It's hard to put something out there and be told it's not good enough for whatever reason. But I often say that I feel that those years were my apprenticeship. I feel that I was writing and learning and developing my craft. And, you do get some letters back from editors or agents just saying they're not interested. But the more you send out there and the stronger your writing becomes, you often start to get letters from editors saying, this isn't something I want to buy right now, but if you make these changes, or they might just, tell you what they've liked about your writing. And I think it's those little messages that really sort of just give you that little bit of strength that you are good enough and to keep on going. But in saying all that, if self-publishing had been a viable option for me during those early years, I may have put something out there sooner. But on the other hand, I'm almost happy that my first novel that was published, was my 7th attempt, because I feel that my writing was so much stronger. And I think just little things like, when you're first starting out, sometimes just the really basic showing, not telling the reader. It's very easy to tell everything in a story when you're first starting out and not really understanding your own voice as a writer, and really showing the emotions of your characters rather than telling them. So I do think that's one thing that I personally learnt over my years writing and being unpublished, was just to go deeper in my characters, into their emotions, into what they're seeing, feeling, hearing, all those sorts of things, and really developing the relationships between my characters. And that's something in my historical fiction that I really try and do, is develop really strong friendships and relationships between my characters, so the reader can really feel and feel a sense of what's going on and how they're feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely feel that in your writing, that depth of character.
Thank you.
So would you suggest then that people, even if they're not I absolutely have to get published, I need this, I'm completely invested in this, that they just submit their writing to a lot of publishers almost just for feedback? Do you think that they actually are giving feedback, or was that kind of rare that you were getting, advice, or was it just yes or no?
Yeah, I think for me, the first few years, it was just a no. But as my writing became stronger and the editors I was sending material to became more interested, suddenly they would give me more feedback, and you might end up with a letter that's more of a revision letter, so more of an editor saying, look, if you make these changes, I will reconsider it. And I think some authors sometimes miss that and don't realize it's actually an open opportunity to resubmit that work if you make changes and really take that feedback on board. Mm-hmm. But no, I think I would just caution people to really be sure about whether they want that work published or not. When I was writing my first few manuscripts, I thought they were the best pieces of writing that I could have created, and I was so proud of them, and deservedly so. It took me a long time to write them. But looking back on them, I can see that they weren't publication ready. So my biggest advice would be to join a professional organization, whether that's your local romance writers chapter for romance writers, or there's lots of women's fiction associations out there, all different types of writing associations that perhaps can pair you with a mentor who's a published writer, or they can they offer contests which give feedback, and often those contests are judged by published writers. And so I think anything you can do to get feedback on your work, and the biggest thing for me, even now after many years of writing and being published, is to put something aside when you've finished it, and whether that's, you know, a week, a month, 2 months, and then look at the book again with fresh eyes, reread your manuscript, you know, read parts of it out loud and make sure that your dialogue sounds natural, you know, to make sure it doesn't sound sort of stiff or wooden, you know, it has to sound natural, as if there really are people talking. And I think reading out loud can really actually help you hear, you know, perhaps things in your writing that you've missed. But yeah, I think for me, I'm pleased that I didn't publish too early. But, you know, in saying that, you can always pull something down, you know, if you decide later on that it's not your best work. But no, I would just, you know, caution to make sure, you know, you are ready to be published and you're not, you know, jumping the gun, so to speak, too quickly.
I feel like you're a very patient woman compared to a lot of the other authors that I've talked to. I feel like everyone's just like, just do it, churn it out. Don't think too much about it.
And look, I'm not patient now.
Do you think you're like, are you like a perfectionist in general, or is it just with your writing, you're like, you know, you're patient with it and you take your time with it and want things to be...
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't think I'm very patient anymore. I think I look back now and think, how did I spend so many years doing something and being rejected and not being published? But I think I was so focused on being a career author and really establishing myself and you know, and hoping to have a long career once I became published. But no, you know, I'm very impatient now. I write something and fire it off to my agent or my editor. But, you know, that's after having a really long relationship with those people. I certainly didn't in the earlier days. But no, I think I'm just always cautious that, you know, you put something out there and that's your brand. And I think you really want to make sure that, you know, that people read it and want to read your next book. So that's the only thing I would say, is just really make sure that, you know, that just think of yourself as a brand. I very much think of my writing work as a business. And in my unpublished years, I was writing full-time as a freelance journalist, and you know, I was just always very conscious that everything I did my journalism and my fiction writing under different names, but everything I did, it was very much a brand to me and a business. And I think it's just about making sure that you're ready for those steps. And I understand how the desperation to get something out there, and whether it be because you want to start earning money from it, or you know, or creatively just putting something out there, it is hard to pause and wait. But yeah, I just think it's I always just caution everybody just to take a breath and make sure you're ready, make sure you've had the feedback, make sure you've put the work in and paid your, you know, say an editor to look over the manuscript, or you know, entered contests and to get feedback. But no, I'm probably not. I am a perfectionist though. Going back to what you said before, I'm definitely a perfectionist. Everything except my housework, because I'm not good at housework, so there's no perfectionism there. But everything else.
Oh man. So I don't recall, did you say you've had I know you said you went back to school and everything. Yeah. Was it a formal training that you had in writing, or was it in something else?
No, I actually studied law. So I went to university and graduated law school, and then I thought, what am I doing? I don't want to be a lawyer. Like, how did I end up here? And I think it's funny, actually. I was listening to an amazing interview last night with Kristen Hanna, and I'm a big fan of hers. And she said that she was a lawyer before, and there's this whole commentary around how are there so many, you know, former lawyers who are authors now. And I do wonder if it's because we're very well trained at writing and, you know, and very disciplined often in certain areas, but we're not fulfilled creatively. And so, you know, it is incredible how many authors are how many authors are former lawyers. But no, so I graduated law school. I realized it wasn't really for me, and my passion really was writing. And then after a few years of working as a freelance journalist and writing books in my spare time, I went back and did my master's degree in creative writing. It wasn't a taught degree. It was more of my manuscript I turned in was my thesis, and it was very much an independent working sort of situation. But it was great to go back to uni and write something that I probably would have been too scared or to write otherwise, and to really challenge myself. So it was great to go through that process. And also I was also seeing how many authors who were being published had, formal qualifications, or, had an MFA behind their name. So I sort of thought, right, that's one more thing I've got to do. That's one thing that'll get me closer. Funnily enough, I actually sold my first book before I graduated. So it wasn't necessary at all, but I'm pleased I did it still.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so did you learn... I know a lot of like best-selling authors I talk to, they'll be like, I haven't had any training, it's just the writing, I don't really use any like plotting methods or anything like that. Is that the same for you, or do you use like we have these templates? So I know the templates because of putting them into the application. So it's like the 27 chapter and the 3-act structure and all these things. That I find are very helpful for getting like a backbone of, okay, like this is what's in a story. A lot of writers I've talked to are just like, nope, I don't use it at all. I've like developed my own method. How are you in that sense with the plotting? Do you follow something, or do you have your own formula going on?
Look, I'm the same as a lot of the other authors you've spoken to. I just sit down and write the book, and it's. But in saying that, I think a lot of the things like the 3-act structure and the hero's journey and all those sorts of things that a lot of writers will be familiar with. I've been to conferences for years and learnt those things and really absorbed all that information and loved all those types of outlines and all those sorts of things. But for me, when it comes to writing, I just sit down and write, and there's no particular plot method or format or anything. Although I do think that once you've been writing for a certain period of time, you just instinctively know the rhythm of the types of stories you write, and you know what you need in it and how much conflict you need, and all those sorts of things. So I think the building blocks are probably there from all those years of writing other novels. And that's when I go back to what I said earlier about my apprenticeship years. It's, I really feel that the more you write, and no writing is ever wasted, because every time you sit down and write, you're learning more, and you're realizing, you're creating your own voice and your own structure and your own rhythm in your writing. So I do feel that that's really valuable, is just to always keep writing, even if your books don't get published. But no, yeah, I'm terrible. I normally just sit down and write. When I write contemporary stories, I just take my laptop and sit down, and the words just seem to flow. With my historical novels, my editor actually said to me, you need to start plotting. Like, you cannot just write these by the seat of your pants. You need to start plotting. And so she was really hard on me, and I realized that she was right, because my historical stories normally have, say, 3 or 4 main female characters, plus perhaps a couple of love interests and other people in the story, plus I've got this whole external plot of the war and what's going on, and it is really hard to to put all that together and make sure the story's balanced and keep track of all that. So I do a chapter by chapter outline now. The first one, it was awful. I just hated it, and I'm getting better at doing it, because plotting doesn't come naturally to me. But yeah, I've become a lot better at doing just even a paragraph or 2 about each chapter, and that can change. It doesn't have to, it can be fluid. It doesn't have to, stay that way, but it just gives me the building blocks to know, that I have all the conflict, that I've, each character has their own story arc, plus the sort of external conflict is woven in throughout the story. So that I'm a converted plotter on some of my stories. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you should check it out on LivingWriter then, because we have all the plots and everything we were talking about before,
Yes.
But we're implementing like a timeline type of situation into the plotting, so that might be helpful for you, because you have all this history going on that you want to line up with.
That would actually be incredible. That would be so helpful, and I think for historical writers and also paranormal authors as well, or building an entire different world as well. You sort of, that timeline is very helpful for writing a series, or for just a standalone novel. So no, I think a timeline, some help with the timeline would be great for me. And like I said to you earlier as well, before we were on air, that I do really love that everything that you have available there in terms of keeping track of everyone. I've got notebooks everywhere scribbling names and who someone's sister is and who they're married to and all those sorts of things. And then I'll be working on the book and think, I've got to try and find that piece of paper. Well, which notebook is that in? So I do think that you could definitely help me there.
Yeah, you got to get on there. You're wasting all this time looking through
Yeah,
these books. It's funny, my mom is
definitely.
the same way. Like she writes and she has like index cards everywhere. She's been writing since I was like born. So
Wow.
she has these all these notebooks and all these index cards. And she's like, she keeps saying, "You have to help me get this onto LivingWriter." I'm like, "Yeah, mom. This is going to be a process. Like 30 years of writing that has to be put on here now." So yeah, get started before it's been like 30 years of writing, because
Yes. Yeah, no,
otherwise, I don't know, it's
that
going to
sounds
be a
like a
huge
good idea.
project.
And I think too, as authors, we can write one book or two books and perhaps in a series, and then think, oh, actually, maybe I'll write another book in that series, or a follow-up novel. And to try and find all that information is actually quite daunting. So if it's in one place, like you're saying, it's so easy to access. So I can see that would be
Yeah,
hugely beneficial.
yeah, for sure. That's actually how the app got started, is, starting to write books and then being like, oh, there's nothing that's like helpful, but also not incredibly confusing. So that's how it was born for these situations.
Great.
So, how much time do you spend writing every day? This is just, I love to know, every author, like, how much time? Because it's almost always exactly the same.
Yeah, wow, a lot of time, I will say. But I'm very fortunate now. When I started writing, I was pregnant. Well, when I was first published, I should say, I was pregnant with my first child, and we now have two children. And it was chaotic. It was just when the first baby was born, you're just thinking,
Mm-hmm.
I've got a full-time job to juggle and these books that I've just, committed to, and it was crazy. And so I wrote all the time, just morning, in the night, just constantly. Now my kids are both at school, and it's much easier. So I very much write, during school hours. So the kids are off to school. I'll walk the dogs. Normally, I've got two dogs, and then I just sit down, and it's just getting in that chair and starting writing. So I pretty much write most of the day until school pickup, and then if I will jump on again at night, or once the kids are in bed, if I get the chance. I'm trying very hard not to work weekends, unless I'm working on time sensitive deadline, with edits or so forth. But yeah, pretty much every day during school hours, and I always set myself a target of 2,000 words a day. So that's my sort of minimum daily writing output. So I find it, for me, better to have a daily word target rather than a set number of hours I have to work. Normally it will take me the same amount of time, but yeah, as long as I get my 2,000 words done, I'm happy. 3,000 is better, but 2,000 is gets me to my deadline.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So everyone's different. Like, they either have like the time limit or the word limit. Some people like shock me with the like how quickly they can write 3,000 words. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I suck then. So how long does it take you then usually? Like, you're doing the writing. Are you like, how many breaks are going on? Are you do like what people say they do, 20-minute sprints? Or
Yeah.
are you just like sitting down for hours on end?
Look, some days it's hours on end, but I do have a really good friend, another author who I write with most days, and we're both in different cities, but we just text each other, and we do those word sprints. So we will normally do 20 minutes, and then text each other, how many words we've done, and then we'll set our timers again and keep going. So, I mean, there are some days where, I can do 750 words in 20 minutes, depending on where I'm at the novel. And those days just blow me away. And there are other days where it's like, 320 words, and you think, oh gosh, this is a slow one. So, some days I could do my writing target in a couple of hours, quite comfortably. Other times I am just sitting there all day trying to get those words out. But I do have to say, so when I'm writing contemporary stories, those words are so fast for me. I could have a 4,000 word day and feel really good, and it doesn't feel that hard. Whereas writing historical, man, if I get to 3,000 words, I feel like I've achieved something, huge, because for some reason those books are harder for me to write. And I think because I'm having to pause quite often and cross-check research, and make sure something's historically accurate, or just check little things all the time, it just seems a bit slower for me in terms of process. But I was used to having to, when I was a journalist, having to write so many words a day, to really tight deadlines, and I think that was very good training for me to actually write fast and really stay on target. But I think, you know, the other thing about being an author is it's all the social media expectations. It's, you know, writing one book and edits come in on another book. You know, all those types of things do take up a lot of time. So I feel like it's a solid working day, but it's not all just writing. Not every day anyway. Some days it's, you know, feels like torture and it takes all day to get to 2,000 words. But yeah.
Yeah. And do you do like, is it, because I know everyone says this to me, they're like, you know, 2 hours a day or 2,000 words a day, and like, is it, aside from the weekend, is it like no days off, no excuses, like absolutely this writing is getting done? And I know for you, like you have this publishing, how like you have people kind of breathing down your neck, like deadlines, so I know it might be different for you, but is it like, that's it, no excuses, like this writing has to get done?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's no excuses. And if I don't do my 2,000 words one day, then, you know, I make it up the next day. I am very hard on myself. And I think that having that discipline does mean that you know that when you commit to a deadline that, you know, that you are going to meet it. And you're right, there are people waiting for me and like you say, breathing down my neck, wanting those books. So it's there's always someone counting on me, and I'm always very mindful of that. I also like to be, you know, as I said before, I very much treat this as a business. So yeah, and I think I'm very hard. I'm hard on myself. So yeah, no, it's always meet my deadline, and always meet my word count. So I am very strict about that word count, and it's just, you know, if I haven't met the word count, then I'm back on the computer that night, you know, put the kids to bed and log back onto the laptop. So yeah, but having weekends off has really helped me creatively just know that I've got a break. So if I, you know, aim for say 10,000 words every week, then, you know, if I haven't met that on a Friday, then I will have to do some work on the weekend. But it is nice just knowing, it's a great feeling knowing you've got all your work done for the week and that you can just have the weekend off.
Absolutely. So how many books have you written?
Oh, I really need to have a tally up of how many books, including a few novellas. I think I'm 41 books. I really need to have a check. Maybe 42. Yeah. Yes. So I've written 7 historical fiction novels, and now written under Soraya M. Lane, which was just a slight rebranding by Amazon. Then I've done all my contemporary romance. So there's a few novellas in there. And I also had a children's series written under my maiden name, Soraya Nicholas, which was published in Australia. And so there were 6 books in that series. So yeah, I think it's about 42 if you include all of those together.
Wow, that's amazing. So
it's been a busy 10 years.
How long? I know you said one of those books took you 2 years. Oh my gosh. And so one of them took you 2 years to write, you said. Yeah. How long now does it take you to write a book?
So I'm much faster. My historical fiction, yes, the first one took 2 years. It was torture. But I was also writing contemporary romance at the time, and I had a day job. So now I'm much faster and more comfortable within the genre as well. I think to start with it was quite daunting. So normally it's probably around a 4-month writing period in the end, by the time I finish the first draft and you know, work on it and edit it. The research is huge as well, so I have I do have dedicated time for research before I start that 4-month writing process, and then there's normally at least a month or 6 weeks of very intense edits back and forth with my editor, doing structural edits. So that's so it's probably around a 6-month all up if you include all the edits with my editor and back and forth, but the actual writing is normally 3 to 4 months. I am a fast writer though, so I like to just get it all on the page and sort of, yeah, I don't like mucking around, so it's good to get it all done. So yeah, around 4 months I think for the actual writing of the draft now. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's pretty quick now compared to
now. Yeah. Yeah.
So you said, like, at one point you had a day job. Like, what was that transition from having a day job to being, like, a career author? Was that difficult? Were you having, like, trouble figuring out when to make that switch over, or was it kind of obvious to you?
Yeah, look, it was It was exciting. It was amazing, actually. It was such a great feeling. I actually quit my day job around the time that my second child was born. So after I'd been published for around about 3 years before I did that, it was very scary saying no to, turning down paid work. I was working as a journalist, and I'd taken so long to create those contacts and establish those working relationships. So it was really scary. And so for me, it was more of a financial decision. I had to look at, at what point, was it viable for me to be able to give up that day job? And so it became obvious that, suddenly month by month, my, financially it was looking, pretty good in terms of what I was bringing in each month or each quarter. And so that was really how I was able to make that decision. There were times I really wanted to give up my day job, and I just wasn't ready to take that leap, just because I wasn't sure enough. I wasn't sure whether my writing was going to keep paying its way, how many contracts I was going to have, that sort of thing. But when I actually did give up the day job, I was writing for 3 different publishers, and it was just I just couldn't juggle it anymore. And although I sound like I have a really good work-life balance now with not working weekends, back then, I don't even think I slept. I don't know how I did it. I was working, non-stop on the weekends and all night, and, just getting a few hours sleep between kids waking up and, all that sort of thing. So I don't think I could have continued on that way for much longer. But, we do these things. We have to try and establish, whether it's a new career or, or starting to write and having to juggle, 2 jobs at the same time. It's just one of those things. And I think in life, often everything happens at once, and it's just trying to figure out how to balance everything and how to keep it all going. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't imagine the working and the kids and the writing. That's a lot. Yeah. That is so much. Well, good for you then. Yeah. So, do you have any advice specifically for our writers who are watching, waiting on, hanging on your every word?
Oh gosh, don't hang on my every word. No, look, my advice is always just to write. So many people will say to me, I really would love to be an author, what should I do? And I say, are you writing? How often are you writing? And they'll go, oh no, I really want to do it one day, but I'm not doing it now. And I think the difference between someone who genuinely wants to be an author and who is going to find success is someone who is writing. They're putting in the hard work. They are sitting down, whether it's in their lunch break, whether it's, in between kids, babies having a nap at home, or when your kids are at school, it's taking the opportunity and getting those words on the page. Because if you're committed to writing and you've got a story that you're working on, you are so much closer to having success and being published than someone else who's just saying they want to be an author. So my biggest advice is to write a little bit every day if you can. I think it takes something like 3 weeks for something to become a habit. So if you start writing, whether it's 100 words a day, 250 words, 500 words a day, whatever your target is, make it something achievable. So, don't make it easy, but make it achievable so that you can tick that off every day. And if you write 500 words a day or 250 words every day, you're flexing that writing muscle. You're starting a habit that you'll hopefully continue to go on with. And just getting those words on the page, I think, takes you so much closer. So my advice is just to keep writing. Write what you love, write what you really enjoy either reading or writing, just so that I think anyone who's reading your work knows if it's genuine, if it's authentically you, if it's something you love, and just really, just commit to putting those words on the page, really.
Absolutely. Great advice for sure, because it's so easy to let all those days go by without doing any writing. I know, even firsthand, I'm just 2,000 words a day. I'm like, oh, maybe 1,000. Like, oh, maybe none. Yeah. Then it's a week, and I'm like, So I hear you.
And look, that's the thing, and I think we have to make it a priority. If someone said to you, can you carve out 20 minutes of every day to do something you absolutely love? Most people would be able to say yes. And so even if it is just 20 minutes, whether it means getting up a little bit earlier in the morning, or getting back on your computer when your kids have gone to bed, or, after you've had dinner, if you've been working, all day, I think it's just really just carving out that little bit of time for you to actually get those words down. And after you do it for a few weeks, or even maybe a few days, suddenly those words are easier. You know, they start to come faster and you realize that you can achieve your target every day. And I think when you keep working a little bit every day, the story stays really clear in your mind. You know, it's fresh in your head, and it's not, you know, if you leave it a week or 2 weeks or even a few days, sometimes you have to reread what you wrote last time. You have to get back into the characters and back into the story. So I do think that doing it regularly most days, if you can, is really helpful to, you know, to being productive and getting closer to being published.
Absolutely. So what book are you working on now that we should keep our eyes out for?
Oh, well, I actually have a new book coming out in 5 weeks' time, which is called The Secrets We Left Behind, and I am really, really excited about that book. I love all my stories. You know, my characters are very real to me and they're very much in my heart all the time, but this one just felt different. I think writing it during a pandemic, you know, on the one hand, I found it hard to be creative, and then on the other, when I actually started writing this book last year, it was just, I don't know, the emotions, the everything about, you know, being in this sort of COVID world, I think really poured out on the page for me. And my editor said to me, you know, gee, like, what's happened here? This book's, you know, it's she just loved it. And I had 2 editors working on it, and I said, it feels different. Like, there's just something about it. It just feels really powerful. And yeah, so I'm really excited about that book. It's set in 1940 in occupied France, so it's another World War II story. So yeah, that comes out on May 20th, which is going to be great. And I'm just doing quite intense structural edits on my 2022 release, which will be out February next year. So it's funny talking about one book that you're excited about being published, but it's kind of, my head's also in another book, which is the one that comes out next year. So yeah, it's exciting. It's all about World War II and you know, women doing absolutely amazing things that a lot of people may not be aware of. So it's yeah, just continuing on from what I've already been publishing.
That's amazing. Very exciting. Yeah, even from the title, I got that same little twinge. Like, I could tell. It'll be good. It'll be good. I could tell.
Yeah. No, I'm really excited about it.
All right, Soraya. Well, thank you. Amazing. So thank you so much for talking with us today. Amazing advice. And thank you to all of our writers and to all of our listeners. And we will see you guys all next time.
That's great. Thank you so much for having me here today.